So you guys have probably seen me playing this game a lot in the background of my videos, and I've never actually, gone into it and stuff, so I figured, why not give a little bit of an explanation? So I'm going to give a pretty quick rundown of this. The game, what your goal is, the weapons that you can use, and the various game modes that you can find. How you play Splatoon is pretty simple. You make a character, either an Inkling or an Octoling, and you go into the game spraying colorful ink everywhere, trying to cover the most amount of ground in your ink. That's the basic premise of Splatoon, and there are tons of different weapons that you have to do that. This is a third-person shooter, and so you've got plenty of variety. Let's start with the shooters. The shooters are your pretty basic jack-of-all-trades that can do a lot of different things. And mostly, they're really good at putting ink on the ground and moving around a lot. These weapons can come in both short-range and long-range varieties, and honestly, both are pretty fun to play. Then we have the rollers. The rollers are weapons that characterize themselves on being incredibly aggressive and sneaky. These weapons don't have a lot of range, but they have very threatening one-shots up close. And despite the name roller, you honestly won't see rollers rolling a lot because rollers roll pretty slowly. Yes, most rollers can one-shot with their roll, but it doesn't have a ton of range. You'll often see rollers do what's called flicking, which is pressing the button and launching your paint instead of just rolling over people. And you can flick in both a horizontal and a vertical way, and so these weapons are pretty versatile. Chargers are up next, and chargers are essentially this game's version of snipers. They have a ton of range, and most chargers also one-shot, though some don't. Chargers are extremely threatening. Like I mentioned, they can threaten to one-shot you from almost anywhere on the map because of their gigantic range. But they're also fairly vulnerable up close, so it's worth trying to close the gap on a charger or toss things at it to distract it in order to, keep it away. Then we got the sloshers or the buckets. The sloshers are really good at dealing out what's called AoE or area of effect damage. Instead of firing paint, they slosh out large globs of paint which deal high damage, and these can be very useful for poking around walls, poking over ledges, or poking under people. These are really threatening weapons and ones that can be played very well in the right hands. Next up we have my personal favorite, the Splatlings. The Splatlings are mid to long range weapons. This class and the charger share a feature in that they have to charge up their shots before they can fire. But while a charger has one big shot that one-shots, a Splatling has several shots that come out at an incredibly fast velocity. These weapons do have to charge, yes, but they also have some of the fastest fire rates in the game and are some of the most threatening weapons in the entire game, especially at mid-range. Next up, we've got the dualies. The dualies are very similar to shooters in how they control, but they are very much unique in that they have a unique feature. The dualies have a unique feature to them known as a dodge roll, and they do this by pressing the shoot and jump buttons at the same time. When they do this, they can dodge attacks and even make their weapon fire a bit faster for a little bit. It's pretty cool. After that, we've got the Brellas, which is a weapon that has a built-in shield that it can deploy at any time in order to protect itself from attacks. The key to playing Brellas well is knowing when to use your shield and when to be firing, balancing those two modes and playing pretty aggressively. Next up, we've got the Blasters. The Blasters are anywhere between short to mid-range weapons that also characterize themselves based on AoE similar to sloshers. They have pretty threatening range and have very wide hitboxes. Blasters also deal a lot more damage at the center, some blasters even one-shotting if you manage to hit a direct hit. So the key with playing blasters is balancing your gameplay around going for directs, which can be really risky, or playing around your AoE and just kind of bugging people and getting splats that way. You're pretty maneuverable and have an extremely large hitbox to play around with. Then we got the brushes. The brushes characterize themselves on having really good movement. They're similar to rollers in that they can roll on the ground, but unlike rollers, they are extremely fast on the ground and they mostly rely on this to be moving around. There also isn't a brush that can one-shot like a roller can, but brushes can maneuver around the map a lot easier and sneak up on people. Next up are the Stringers. Stringers are long-range weapons similar to chargers, except they characterize themselves on the AoE damage that they deal with their projectiles. Stringers are generally a little bit more maneuverable than chargers, and they can also go for more unique options because they can arc their shots. Finally, we have the Spatanas. The Spatanas are incredibly threatening mid-range weapons that threaten to one-shot up close and also have a horizontal slash bow that has pretty decent range. These are some of the most versatile weapons in the game, as you can favor either their incredibly long range or their incredibly threatening one-shot that they have up close if you hit a direct slice, which is really satisfying, by the way. Alright, now let's do a quick overview of the game modes. First of all is Turf War. Turf War is your most basic mode. Cover the most amount of ground in your ink and you win the game. This is the most basic mode of the game, and it's fairly beginner friendly because it doesn't just reward, like getting splats, it also rewards just covering the ground with your ink, since, that's the main goal of the game. It's a very good casual mode, and a good mode to get people into the game. Next up is Splat Zones, which is your first ranked mode in the game. Splat Zones is essentially king of the hill. There's a giant zone that sits in the center of the map, and your goal is to cover it with your team's ink color, and keep it that way for a certain amount of time. There's a timer that goes down, and essentially your goal is to get that timer down to 0. If the other team manages to fill it with their ink, then the timer flips into their favor, and the game keeps going until someone manages to get their timer down to 0. Next up is Tower Control. Now, I haven't played Team Fortress 2 myself, but I've heard that this mode is very similar to a mode called Payload from that game. Essentially, there is a giant tower that sits in the center of the map, and your goal as a team is to move it towards the goal that resides in the enemy base. There are also checkpoints that you have to pass through that the tower will stop at, and so you have to defend yourself at these checkpoints. Next up is Rainmaker. Rainmaker I've heard described as a reverse capture the flag, and I think that sums it up pretty well. Essentially, there's this big weapon in the center called the Rainmaker, and your goal is to carry it to the pedestal that is on the enemy team's base. The Rainmaker itself is an incredibly powerful but very slow weapon, and so the whole game mode pretty much revolves around your teammates protecting the Rainmaker as the Rainmaker moves its way towards the other team's base. And then finally, there's Clam Blitz. Clam Blitz is easily the most complicated mode of them all, but I think explaining it kind of like football works pretty well. Essentially, there are a whole bunch of clams scattered around the map, and your goal as a team is to fill the other team's clam basket with your clams. In order to break the other team's basket open, you're going to need what's called a power clam, meaning that you're going to need to collect 8 power clams scattered around the stage. Collecting 8 of them combines to make a power clam, which essentially allows you to break the barrier and allows you to toss individual clams into the basket. The team that gets the most clams in the other team's basket, or the team that manages to get their counter down to 0, wins the game. So yeah, that's a pretty basic overview of Splatoon and stuff. Hopefully you understand just a little bit more of what goes on in the background of my videos and stuff now. I actually got a suggestion from my server to do, this kind of stuff, so let me know what you think. Thanks so much for watching, y'all, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.